My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm 28 years old. And for a long time, I thought the worst thing that could ever happen to me was watching my mother die. I was wrong. The worst part came after. Before I tell you about the eviction notices, the police reports, and the day I watched my own father escorted out of my house by sheriff's deputies, you need to understand who my mother was and what that house meant to her, because none of this happened by accident. My mom, Margaret Hayes, died 3 years ago from stage 4 ovarian cancer. By the time the doctors caught it, it had already spread. They gave her a grim timeline, and she beat it, barely, for 18 months. I was there for all of it. Every chemo session, every hospital stay, every appointment where the doctor avoided eye contact, just a little too carefully. My father was there sometimes. He always had a reason. Work emergencies, client meetings, being too emotional to handle seeing her like that. I remember one chemo session in particular, one of the worst. Mom was throwing up so violently, the nurses had to give her extra medication. She was shaking, pale, barely conscious. Dad had promised he'd come. An hour before, he texted, "Boss needs me. Big client. I'm sorry." Mom smiled weakly when I told her. "It's okay," she said. But I saw it. The disappointment. The quiet recalibration. Like she'd expected it, but still hoped she'd be wrong. That happened a lot. While Dad stayed at work, I took unpaid leave from my job as a data analyst and sat in stiff hospital chairs, holding her hand while poison dripped into her veins to kill the cancer that was killing her. I brought her books, magazines, those awful cafeteria sandwiches she somehow grew to like. We talked about everything. She told me stories about her students, about the ones who struggled but kept going, about the ones who came back years later to thank her. Mom had been a high school English teacher for 26 years, the kind everyone remembers, the kind who stayed late to help with college essays, who bought supplies with her own money, who made Shakespeare feel relevant to kids who swore they hated reading. At her funeral, former students showed up, grown adults who'd driven hours just to say goodbye. That was who she was. And she was generous with everyone, except when it came to her money and her house. That she protected fiercely. She wasn't wealthy, but she was smart. She saved. She invested carefully. And in 2008, when the market crashed, she bought a 3-bedroom house in a good neighborhood entirely in her own name. I still remember the day she came home with the closing papers, smiling like a kid on Christmas morning. "I did it," she said, "all on my own." She'd bought it using money from her grandmother's estate before she married my father. He moved in later, but legally, the house was always hers. She made sure of it. She kept meticulous records, filed documents twice, stored copies in a safe deposit box. And in the final weeks, when she knew she wasn't going to make it, she called her attorney to the hospital. Right there, in that sterile room that smelled like disinfectant and fear, she updated her will. I sat beside her bed as she spoke. Her voice was weak but unwavering. "The house goes to my daughter, full ownership. I want it in writing that no one else has any claim to it. Not my husband, not anyone, just Eleanor." Dad wasn't there. He was in the cafeteria, probably getting his third coffee. He didn't know about the change until after the funeral. When Mom died, I inherited a fully paid-off house worth nearly $500,000. And from the very beginning, my father acted strange about it. That was the first warning. I wish I'd listened. For the first few weeks after Mom's funeral, the house didn't feel like a house. It felt like a museum that had locked its doors. Every room still smelled like her, clean laundry and vanilla hand lotion. Her mug sat in the sink like she might come back and wash it. Her slippers were tucked under the armchair in the living room, toes pointed outward like she'd kicked them off in a hurry. I couldn't bring myself to move anything. And my dad? He moved through it like a ghost who thought the walls belonged to him. At the reading of the will, the attorney, Raymond, the same one who'd visited Mom in the hospital, was formal and gentle. He explained the house was left entirely to me. Not half, not shared, not joint. Mine. My father's face didn't crumple with grief the way I expected. It tightened, like someone had just told him he'd lost something he assumed was already his. Afterward, outside the office, he pulled me aside. His eyes were red, but I couldn't tell if it was sadness or anger that was making them glassy. "Eleanor," he said quietly, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now." I waited. He looked down at his hands and shook his head like he couldn't believe the words he was about to say. "I can't stay in there alone," he murmured. "Not yet. It's too hard being in that house without her." I felt my throat tighten. Grief does that, makes you soft where you should be firm. "I'm not asking to stay forever," he added quickly, like he knew what my face was doing. Just temporarily, a few months. I'll get my finances in order, find a place, and I'll be out by Christmas. Christmas. That sounded reasonable. Humane. Like something a daughter would do for a father who'd just lost his wife of 30 years. And I wasn't heartless. So I nodded. Okay, I said. 6 months, Dad. Rent-free. But you're figuring it out. No dragging this on. His shoulders sagged in visible relief. He stepped forward and hugged me hard, like I'd just saved him from drowning. Thank you, he whispered. Your mom would be proud of you. I should have caught the way he used her name like a tool. I should have caught the way that sentence didn't comfort me. It cornered me. But grief makes you blind. At the time, I was living in a small apartment across town, working full-time as a data analyst for a logistics company. The job was steady, decent pay, long hours. My apartment was basically a polished shoebox. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that eventually I'd move into Mom's house, the house that was now mine. But not yet. Not while every room still held her voice. So Dad moved in full-time, and I stayed in my apartment. In the beginning, it was almost normal. Dad kept to himself. He went to work, he was an insurance adjuster, and came home, watched TV, went to bed. Sometimes, when I'd stop by once a week to check the mail or handle maintenance, he'd mention he was looking at listings. Prices are insane, he'd complain. Or, I'm just not ready to make a decision yet, and I let it go, because he'd lost Mom. Because I didn't want to be the kind of daughter who shoved her grieving father out the door like an unwanted guest. That was my second mistake. The first year slipped by. Then Christmas came and went. Then my birthday. Then spring. And Dad was still there. I remember standing in the kitchen one afternoon, Mom's kitchen, watching Dad pour coffee into the mug she used to drink from. He'd started doing that, using her things. Not reverently, not like a man holding on to the last traces of his wife. More like someone slowly erasing her. I thought you said you'd be out by Christmas, I said lightly, trying to sound like it didn't matter. Dad didn't even look up from the coffee. Yeah, well, things happen. You know how it is. I didn't. Because I'd been honoring deadlines my entire adult life. Rent, bills, work reports, lease renewals. But my dad said it like the concept of a timeline was optional. I swallowed the irritation because it didn't feel worth a fight. I told myself he just needed more time. That was the story I kept feeding myself. Then year 2 began, and something shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once. It happened the way rot happens. Slow, quiet. And by the time you smell it, the damage is already deep. Dad started making comments. Little ones. Casual ones. The kind you could almost laugh off if you weren't paying attention. We really should repaint the living room, he said one day. We. I glanced at him. I'll handle it. He looked offended. Actually offended. I live here, he said. I can take care of it. I stared at him, confused by how quickly the conversation had changed. Dad, you're staying here temporarily. His jaw tightened. I'm not helpless, Eleanor. That's not what I meant. But he held on to that tone, the wounded, defensive tone, like it was armor. If I challenged him, he became the victim. And if he became the victim, then I became the cruel daughter. So I started choosing silence, and he started taking that silence as permission. Next, he began inviting people over without telling me. The first time it happened, I walked in unannounced, like I always did, and the backyard was full of men I didn't recognize. Loud voices, beer bottles, smoke from my grill. My grill. Dad was laughing like it was his patio, his lawn, his home. When he saw me, he lifted a hand casually. Oh, hey, we're just having a little barbecue. My throat went tight. Who are they? Guys from work, he said, like that explained everything. Relax, Eleanor, it's fine. Fine. Like my discomfort was a childish overreaction. I waited until they were gone before I confronted him. But even then, he acted like I was the problem. It's a house, he said, exasperated. Houses are meant to be lived in. Your mom wouldn't want it to just sit empty. Don't do that. Don't bring her into this. But he did, again and again. Whenever I pushed back, he'd say her name like it was a trump card. So I let it slide, because I was still grieving. Because I didn't want to fight. Because part of me still wanted to believe my father wouldn't intentionally hurt me. Then came the smaller changes. He rearranged the pantry. He swapped out light bulbs. He fixed the hallway closet Mom used to keep organized. I'd open a drawer and find everything shifted. Not enough to call it a violation. Just enough to remind me he was settling in, and I was letting him. One night, I showed up after work to drop off some mail and found Dad on the phone in the living room. He didn't hang up when he saw me. He just kept talking. Yes, he said, voice warm. It's a 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms, great neighborhood, finished basement. You'd love it here. My stomach turned, because he wasn't describing a house he lived in temporarily. He was describing a house he was already marketing, already claiming. When he finally ended the call, I asked, "Who was that?" Dad waved a hand like it didn't matter. "Just a friend." "What friend?" He gave me a look, sharp, irritated. "Why are you interrogating me?" "Because you're describing my house like it's yours." But I didn't say it. I just watched him, and something cold flickered in my chest. Not anger yet, not fear, just a quiet realization that I'd been treating this like grief and kindness. And Dad had been treating it like a takeover. A month later, I noticed new plates in the cabinet. Not Mom's, cheap, mismatched ones. Then a different shower curtain. Then a set of throw pillows on the couch that didn't belong there. I asked Dad where they came from. His answer was too casual. "Oh, I picked them up. The place needed freshening up." The place. Like it was his. I went home that night to my apartment and sat on my bed, staring at the wall. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself it was just a dad trying to cope. But deep down, the truth was beginning to take shape in the dark. My father wasn't acting like a guest anymore. He was acting like a man who'd decided the house was his, and was just waiting for me to stop correcting him. And I was tired. Tired of grief. Tired of being the adult. Tired of feeling like the villain in my own story. So I kept my distance. I visited less. I checked in through texts. I let my father occupy my mother's home while I stayed in a rented shoebox across town. Because I thought avoiding conflict was the same as keeping peace. 8 months ago, I learned how wrong that was. Because one Saturday morning, I walked into my kitchen and found a woman standing at the stove, a woman I had never seen before. And she looked at me like I was the intruder. She was humming. That was the first thing that registered. Soft, off-key humming, like she was comfortable enough in the space to forget anyone else existed. The second thing I noticed was the smell. Bacon, coffee, toast. Breakfast in my kitchen. I stood frozen in the doorway, keys still in my hand, trying to make sense of the scene in front of me. The woman at the stove turned around. She startled when she saw me, spatula lifting defensively like I'd caught her mid-crime. "Oh, you must be Eleanor," she said brightly, recovering almost instantly. "Your father's told me so much about you." She smiled. Big, confident, familiar. Too familiar. "I'm Lydia." She extended her hand like this was a normal introduction, like she hadn't been standing in a house she didn't own, cooking food she didn't buy, wearing pajamas I'd never seen before. Behind her, I heard footsteps on the stairs. My father appeared, tying the belt of his robe, his expression shifting the moment he saw my face. "Oh, hey, kiddo," he said, too casual. "I was going to tell you." "Tell me what?" "That a stranger had a spatula in my kitchen? That you'd moved someone in without saying a word?" He gestured between us awkwardly. "This is Lydia. We've been seeing each other." "For how long?" I asked. He hesitated. "A few months." "A few months." He'd been living in my house for over 2 years, dating someone for months. And this was how I found out? I smiled tightly. "I didn't realize we had guests." Lydia laughed like I'd made a joke. "Oh, I'm not a guest," she said lightly. "I stay over sometimes." "Sometimes." She flipped the bacon like she'd done it 100 times before. Dad cleared his throat. "Eleanor, we're adults. I'm allowed to have a personal life." "I didn't say you weren't," I replied. "I said you didn't tell me." His shoulders stiffened. "Your mother's been gone for over 2 years," he snapped. "Am I supposed to be alone forever?" There it was. The pivot. The guilt. I felt it settle over my chest like a weight. Lydia reached out and touched his arm, soothing. "She's just surprised," she said to him, not to me. "I get it. Change is hard." Change. That was what she called it. Not intrusion. Not boundary crossing. Change. I left shortly after, because if I stayed any longer, I was going to say something I couldn't take back. I told myself it was fine. I told myself my dad deserved happiness. I told myself Lydia was just passing through. I was wrong. She didn't just start staying over more. She started staying. I'd come by and find her shoes by the door, her shampoo in the shower, her clothes in the guest room closet. Then the guest room wasn't the guest room anymore. It was her room. She got a key without asking me. I found out because one afternoon I walked in and she was curled up on the couch, my mother's couch, watching reality TV and eating cereal out of one of Mom's bowls. She waved at me like I'd walked into her living room. "Oh, hey, your dad said you might stop by." I stood there stunned. Every visit after that, something had changed. Throw pillows appeared, then different curtains in the bathroom, then a decorative sign in the kitchen. Whitewood, curly letters. Live, laugh, love. It felt like a slap, like a cheap slogan plastered over years of real memories. Each small change erased something of my mother, and Lydia never asked. When I finally tried to talk to my dad about it, really talk, he shut me down immediately. "What do you want me to do?" he demanded. "Live like a monk?" "I want you to respect that this is still my house," I said carefully. "That we had an agreement." He scoffed. Your mother wouldn't want me miserable. Stop using her name. But he didn't stop. He used it like a shield, like a weapon. And Lydia? She smiled through it all. Polite, sweet, supportive, always just a little too confident. Then her family started appearing. First came her daughter, Brittany, 23, perpetually between jobs. She'd show up for dinner and end up crashing on the couch. Then came Brittany's boyfriend, Kevin. Skinny, scraggly beard, band t-shirts from groups that broke up before I graduated high school. He raided my fridge, played video games until 3 in the morning. Once I found him asleep in my mother's office, snoring on the couch Mom had picked out to grade papers. I felt sick. Then came Lydia's sister Sharon, loud and opinionated, with her 2 teenagers in tow. Weekends turned into invasions. I'd show up for my weekly check-in and find 6, sometimes 7 people spread across the house. Cooking, eating, lounge sprawled, acting like I was the inconvenience. No one paid rent. No one paid utilities. No one asked permission. They treated my house like a free Airbnb with family privileges. And my father? He acted like this was normal. Like this was what I'd agreed to. When I complained, Lydia would tilt her head sympathetically. We're just family-oriented people, she'd say. We stick together. That word, family, became their excuse for everything. I stopped leaving food in the fridge, stopped recognizing the place, stopped feeling welcome in the home my mother had died to protect. The final straw came 4 months ago. My apartment lease was ending. Rent had gone up, and I finally admitted what I'd been avoiding. It's my house. I should be living in it. So one evening after work, I went over to tell my dad I was moving back in. I walked through their front door and didn't recognize the living room. The couch was gone. Gone. Replaced by a bulky brown sectional that looked like it had come from a clearance warehouse. New coffee table. New lamps. Different curtains. My mother's living room erased. Lydia stood in the kitchen, humming again. Oh, good, she said brightly. You're home early. I'm making pot roast. You'll stay for dinner, right? I stared at the empty space where Mom's couch had been. Where is it? I asked. Lydia blinked. The old couch? Oh, that thing was so dated. We donated it. The room tilted. She smiled proudly. Cost us almost $2,000 for the new one, but it's much better for family gatherings. I felt something in my chest snap. That couch wasn't furniture. It was memory. It was Saturday afternoons and late-night talks, and my mother planning a future she never got to see. And Lydia had thrown it away like trash. You had no right, I said quietly. Her smile faltered. Dad rushed in from the garage. Eleanor, relax. It was worn out. Lydia found a great deal. It wasn't yours, I said. Lydia opened her mouth. Well, actually... Dad shot her a warning look. I turned to him. What did she mean by actually? He swallowed. We got married, he said. The floor dropped out from under me. Last month, quietly. He straightened like this was supposed to impress me. So technically, this is her house too. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't grief. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was a calculated takeover. And they thought I was too polite, too emotional to stop it. They were about to learn how wrong they were. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Married. My father had gotten married in secret and thought that single word rewrote reality. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter to steady myself. The same counter my mother had leaned against every morning while grading papers, coffee in hand, glasses sliding down her nose. Say that again, I whispered. Dad cleared his throat. Lydia and I made it official. Just a justice of the peace. No fuss. No fuss, I repeated. Lydia stepped closer, sliding seamlessly into place beside him. We didn't want to burden you while you were busy, she said gently. But we're a family now. Family. That word again. And because we're married, my father continued, confidence creeping into his voice, this house is ours too. No, I said. He waved it off. You put me on the deed when I moved in. The room went dead silent. I stared at him. I did not. Yes, you did, he snapped. We signed papers. What papers? He moved to the junk drawer, the one my mother had kept meticulously organized, and dumped its contents onto the counter. Batteries, menus, old keys. He pulled out a thin stack of documents and thrust them toward me like a winning hand. There, he said, right there. My hands shook as I flipped through them. Emergency maintenance authorization. Limited power of attorney. Permission to call contractors. Nothing about ownership. These don't give you the house, I said. They let you call a plumber. Lydia crossed her arms. Well, we've been living here for years, she said coolly. Paying utilities, maintaining the property, that counts. Adverse possession doesn't work that way, I shot back. And you've been here with permission. Dad's face hardened. I'm not a guest in my own home. It's not your home, I said. It's mine. That's when the shouting started. He yelled about raising me. about entitlement, about how I wouldn't even have this house if not for him marrying my mother. Lydia chimed in about respect, about elders, about how family shares. I listened, and when they finally paused, waiting for me to fold, I said the words that changed everything. You have 30 days to move out. Dad laughed. Actually laughed. You can't evict us. I can, I said. You'll hear from my attorney. I left before I cried. The next morning, I called Raymond, the attorney who'd handled my mom's estate. When I told him everything, there was a long silence. Eleanor, he finally said, I need to ask you something carefully. Did you ever sign documents transferring ownership of that house? No. Another pause. Because 6 months ago, a quitclaim deed was filed, with your signature, giving your father 50% ownership. My blood went ice cold. That's impossible. I believe you, Raymond said, which means this is fraud. Fraud. My father had forged my name. Raymond laid out the plan with clinical precision. Dispute the deed. File a police report. Begin formal eviction. That evening, I returned to the house with him. The living room was packed. Lydia's daughter, her boyfriend, her sister, her nieces, even her elderly mother, sitting in my recliner. 8 people. In my house. Raymond introduced himself and handed my father the paperwork. The color drained from his face as he read. This is harassment, Lydia shouted. No, Raymond replied calmly. This is the law. You can't do this to family, my father yelled. Family doesn't forge deeds, Raymond said. The room exploded. Shouting, cryings, accusations. I raised my voice just once. 30 days, everyone out. Dad stared at me like I was a stranger. But I didn't feel guilty. I felt clear, and that clarity terrified him. The next 30 days were a lesson in just how far someone will go when they believe blood entitles them to everything. I documented everything. Every night, Lydia's family slept there. Every utility bill my father paid and loudly claimed as rent. Every hole drilled into my walls. Every piece of my mother's furniture that disappeared or came back damaged. Raymond told me to treat it like a criminal case. Because it is one, he said flatly. The police investigation moved faster than I expected. Too fast for someone who thought he'd been clever. The forged quitclaim deed hadn't appeared by magic. It had fingerprints all over it, figuratively and literally. Dad had used an old birthday card I'd written him years ago, traced my signature, practiced it, then filed the deed himself at the county recorder's office. On camera. He hadn't even worn a hat. When detectives confronted him, he denied it at first, swore he had no idea how it happened, claimed it must have been a misunderstanding. Then they showed him the footage, the pen he used, the date, the signature practice pages found in his car. That's when he broke. He told them he panicked after marrying Lydia, said he was terrified I'd abandon him, that he needed security, stability, control. Control. Lydia, of course, claimed ignorance. But her earlier lectures about adverse possession told a different story. They were running out the clock, betting on my guilt. They thought I'd cave. I didn't. On day 31, I showed up with Raymond, a locksmith, and 2 sheriff's deputies. Dad answered the door, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Unshaven, sleepless, cornered. Please, he begged. Just a little more time. Then he tried the final card. What would your mother say? I looked him straight in the eye. She warned me about you. That was the moment his hope died. The deputies gave them 4 hours. 4 hours to pack up 3 years of entitlement. They took what they could, tried to take what they couldn't. I stopped them. The sectional stayed. Mom's china stayed. The lawnmower stayed. They left behind holes in the walls, stains in the carpet, broken hinges, damage that cost thousands to repair. But they left. All of them. Dad tried one last time, his voice cracking, reminding me of school plays and scraped knees and bedtime stories. You threw that away, I said, not me. Then I told him the truth. That Mom changed her will because she didn't trust him. That she protected me from him. That she knew exactly who he was. I watched the words hollow him out. And when Lydia honked the horn impatiently, he climbed into the truck without another word. The locks were changed that night. Every single one. For the first time in 3 years, the house was quiet. Not empty. Quiet. Mine again. The locksmith worked methodically. New deadbolts, new door handles, a new garage opener. Metal clicked into place with a finality that felt heavier than grief, but cleaner. The sheriff's deputies waited until the last truck disappeared down the street before nodding to me and leaving. Their job was done. Mine was just beginning. I stood alone in the living room. The house looked wounded. Scuffed floors. Holes where pictures had been ripped from the walls. Carpet stains that hadn't been there before. But it was quiet. No humming, no voices, no strangers calling it family. I walked room to room like someone relearning a language. In the kitchen, I opened drawers and reorganized them the way Mom used to. Labels in my head, everything with a place. In the hallway, I picked up the framed photo Lydia had left behind by accident and set it face down in a box marked discard. Then I went into my old bedroom. I hadn't slept there in 3 years. The bed creaked the same way it always had. The window still caught the afternoon light just right. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the house, the pipes, the walls settling, the familiar sounds that had been drowned out by chaos for so long. That night, I slept deeply. Not peacefully, but deeply. The legal fallout took months. My father was charged with forgery and fraud. Because of the value of the property involved, it was a felony. He took a plea deal, probation, community service, restitution for legal fees. Lydia divorced him 6 months later. Apparently, stability loses its appeal when it comes with criminal charges and no house attached. She moved out of state with Brittany. Last I heard, she was already dating someone new. My father lost his job. The insurance company couldn't keep an adjuster with a fraud conviction. He ended up in a small apartment across town, working retail, barely scraping by. He tried to reach out. Through relatives, through old friends, through messages that said things like, "We should talk, and I'm still your father." I never responded. Some family members thought I was too harsh. My aunt called, told me I should forgive him. That family matters more than money. I asked her if she'd forgive someone who forged her signature to steal her home. She changed the subject. Others understood. My cousin, who'd always been close with Mom, told me something that stayed with me. "She knew," he said. "That's why she did it the way she did." I spent the next few months restoring the house, patching walls, replacing flooring, repainting every room. It became a ritual, erasing every trace of entitlement, reclaiming each corner with intention. I framed the deed and hung it in the hallway. Not out of spite, out of respect. Every now and then, I see my father's car slow down in front of the house. He never stops. Just drives by, lingers, speeds away. I don't know what he's thinking. Regret? Loss? Or just remembering what he almost had? The house is mine now. Completely, legally, undeniably. My mother's final gift wasn't just property. It was foresight. Protection. Proof that someone loved me enough to see the danger coming and stand between me and it, even from a hospital bed. My father chose his comfort over her legacy, and he lives with that choice. Every day.